welcome back to my channel. It's Megan, and today is part 2 of the Phoenix Writer Readathon recommendations. Today I will be going over the prompts from levels 4 and 5 and giving my recommendations for those. As the same as last time, I will be recommending 2 books per prompt, and most of these are books I've read, but I will preface if I have not read them before recommending it. One of the given abilities for level 4 is to learn focus. This is to read a book in one sitting. I have 2 short kind of books here. The first is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This tells the story of a girl who was the first person from her tribe to be invited to this intergalactic university. However, on the way there, her spaceship is hijacked by this alien race that is the mortal enemy of humans. However, along the way, Binti discovers that the clay that she keeps on her skin as part of her culture is actually a healing property for this alien race, and she barters with them and creates a peace treaty between the 2 human races. It's very fast-paced, very easy to read, and it's less than 100 pages, so definitely something you can read in one sitting. My next recommendation for one sitting is Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu. This is the story of Biddy, who is a college freshman. He was formerly a figure skater and has now taken up the art of hockey. He is moving into college, discovering his sexuality and coming out, and learning what it means to kind of be a freshman in school. It is a lot of his life. He is a YouTuber, a baker, and he's really fun to follow. And being that it is a graphic novel, it should be totally accomplishable in one sitting. Next is Learn Archery. Read a book with a weapon on the cover or a character who uses a bow and arrow in the book. For this, I have the Percy Jackson and the Olympians, book 1, The Lightning Thief. As you can see, Percy is holding his sword there, and I recommend this because it is such a fun middle grade about, I'm pretty sure we all know what Percy Jackson is about, but just in case, this is a story of half-bloods, which are half human and half Greek god, and it's so much fun. I love these stories, I love mythology, and it's really interesting to see how Rick ties in all the elements to this world. My next recommendation for Learn Archery actually accomplishes both with this edition. It is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. In this, our main character Feyre uses a bow and arrow, and her bow and arrow is right on the cover here. A Court of Thorns and Roses, or ACOTAR as it is widely known, is a loose retelling of Beauty and the Beast in which Feyre is taken to the land of fairy and has to live out the rest of her days there in exchange for accidentally killing one of the Fae. So it's a lot of fun, and the sequel, A Court of Mist and Fury, is one of the best romances of all time. Another ability you might need to accomplish is night vision. Read a book entirely at night. Most people would probably want to read a spooky or some sort of book along those lines. Me, however, I want to read something lighthearted as I'm about to go to bed, so I have 2 contemporaries to recommend. The first is To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han, which tells the story of Lara Jean, who writes love letters to all the boys she's ever loved and stores them away for safekeeping, just so she can kind of sort out her feelings and get past the crush. However, one day her younger sister comes across these letters and sends them out to all of those boys, so it is the repercussions of that. And next is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Abertali, and this tells the story of Simon, who uses his email or a fake email to communicate with another gay guy at his school. However, one day one of the popular kids at school discovers this email and blackmails him to try to make Simon set him up with one of his friends, and it's just about coming out and why straight is the norm and that kind of thing, and it was a really fun and lighthearted read, and the ending was so cute. Next is Code Writing and or Breaking, and that is to read a book recommended by a friend. The first is Girls of Paper and Fire. This was recommended by one of my friends here on BookTube, and it ended up being one of my favorite books of this year. It tells the story of Lay, who is taken in as the 9th concubine to the Demon King. He normally only takes in 8, but he is enraptured by her demon eyes, and it's the love story between two of the concubines, Lay and another, and it's so good and I really loved it, and yes. Next one is A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahara Mafi. This is a contemporary that was recommended to me by one of my coworkers, and it ended up being my favorite contemporary of all time. It tells the story of a girl who is Muslim directly after 9/11 falling in love with the golden boy of the school and their story. It's also such a realistic and bittersweet ending, and I think it ended perfectly. And yes, I don't really have much to say just because I love it so much. There's breakdancing, there's a lot of talk about racism and stereotyping, and it's so good. Next is the Shadow Mage ability, and that is to read a book with a villain or hate to love character. And for this, I think this is probably one of the most hate to love character villains out there, and that is the Darkling from Shadow and Bone. This tells the story of Aaliyah, who is an orphan that discovers she is actually the Sun Summoner, which is the rarest Grisha ability of all time, and it's her learning her abilities and saving the world essentially, and it's really good. And the Darkling is our villain in this story and everyone loves him. Next is A Darker Shade of Magic. I don't know why I grabbed this edition. This is the French edition, so it says Shades of Magic, but A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is the story of Kel, who has the ability to travel between 4 different Londons. There's Red London, which is his London and full of magic, Grey London, which is essentially our London, White London, which is kind of corrupt, and Black London, which is completely demolished. And it is his duty to travel and send and take messages back and forth between these Londons, and he runs into Lila, who is trying to escape her life, and they save the 4 Londons. And the villain in this book ends up being really cool, and I love the series. Next is to gain the enemy's trust by reading a book in a genre you don't typically read. For me, I don't typically read romance or hard-hitting contemporary or just contemporary in general. I'm much more on the fantasy sci-fi side of things. However, I have discovered quite a few, and I'm going to recommend 2 now. First is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This tells the story of 2 authors, one who is a women's romance fiction author, and then we have a literary fiction author, and one day they run into each other on the beach and realize that they are both experiencing a writer's block, so they make a pact to write in the other's genre of choice to try to break this writing slump, and it ends up being a really cute romance. And next is On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. This tells the story of Bree, whose father was a well-known rapper within this world, and Bree, all she wants to do is be a rapper, but she doesn't want to live in her late father's shadow, so she is trying to make her own name, especially as a young female in the rap world. And I highly recommend reading the audiobook version of this because it does include the rapping, and it is so good. The last possible ability in level 4 is Team Relay. Read a book in a series. My first recommendation for this is Darkness Becomes Her by Kelly Keaton. This is from the Gods and Monsters series. This tells the story of Ari, who has always felt lost and alone and strange in this world. Her mother isn't really around, so one day she decides to learn more about her mother and goes to their hometown, or her hometown, and discovers maybe she's not so strange after all. And I'm hoping you can kind of catch on by it being called the Gods and Monsters series, but it is so good. Next is one of my favorite series, which is Caraval. This is the kind of exclusive dust jacket, so ignore that. This tells the story of Tella and Scarlet, who all they've ever wanted to do is visit this Caraval scavenger hunt nightly performance that only happens once a year. And one day they receive tickets, and when they arrive, Tella is stolen, and it is essentially the scavenger hunt of finding Tella this year. So Scarlet is on the hunt for Tella. The final level is level 5, which is either ruler of Pyra, a ruler of the Golden Empire, so you must accomplish some things that require the level of being a monarch. First ability you must master is ambition, and I don't know what is more ambitious than reading a book over 500 pages. My first recommendation for this is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This tells the story of a queendom in which the succession of this queen is the only thing stopping this dragon from coming back. We follow a bunch of different perspectives, but it is essentially around trying to stop the nameless one, is his name, from coming back. And there's a lot of great rep, there's dragon riders, there's war, there's political intrigue. It's so good. My next recommendation for a book over 500 pages would be Skyward, which is a sci-fi in which we follow Spinsa, whose father fled the war in the middle of a battle and was labeled a coward, and Spinsa is trying to live up to or like exceed expectations that have been put on her due to this, and it's about her in flight school. There is a slug named Doomslug, and there is a sentient spaceship, and it's just so much fun. Next is Leadership, and that is to pick a book on your TBR that has a very low amount of reviews on Goodreads. We originally said the least amount of reviews, but there's not really a way to check that without looking at every single book. So I just kind of guessed. I have two books that are a little bit less known. The first is The Maidenship, and this is by Michelle Rickman, and this tells the story of Dane, who was raised on land, and then around the age of 9 his mother died and his father took him to sea for the rest of his life, and now all he wants to do is have his own life and go back to land and just start being his own person. However, one day his father is killed and a mysterious girl shows up on a ship, and he starts to discover powers he never knew he had. So it is a wild ride and a lot of fun, and the settings and the magic system in this are really cool. My next recommendation for a lesser known book is Wildcat by J.P. Harker. This is a historical fiction fantasy about this world in which there is a tribe being taken over by the Golden Empire, I guess you could say. In this, we are following Rhiannon, who has always been a warrior. However, she is now tasked with being a mother, and she has to kind of decide between what's more important to her, like being the mother or fighting and being true to herself. So it's a lot of fun. It's pretty thick and it's very gory, so just be aware of that, but it is a good book if you're looking to pick up something lesser known. The next option is Rescue, or read a book that is secondhand, and that can be like buying from a friend, buying from Facebook, buying from a thrift store, whatever you think a secondhand book is. And for me, I haven't read either of these, but I did want to recommend them just because they are secondhand. The first I bought off a Facebook group. It is Wilder Girls by Rory Power, and I've heard that this is a gender-bent Lord of the Flies, so I cannot wait to get into this one, and it will probably be one of the ones I pick up for October. Next is The Smoke Thieves. I haven't read much about this, but from what I can tell, it is the story of 5 people, essentially like a royal, servant, soldier, demon hunter, so on and so forth, all become entwined in their stories through a mysterious smoke, and it's them learning how this intertwines their stories. Next is Raid, or read a book that you have borrowed, and I'm personally going to recommend 2 audiobooks that you could check out from the library. The first is Sadie by Courtney Summers. Preface, I haven't read either of these, I've just heard that they're really good audiobooks. Sadie tells a story of a girl whose sister has gone missing, and it's her journey in trying to find her sister. So it's told in the point of view of the sister, but also in the point of view of like a podcast host / reporter trying to find out what happened to both these girls. And the next recommendation is Felix Ever After by Kaysen Calendar, which tells the story of Felix, who is transgender, black, and queer. And with all of these marginalizations, he's starting to feel like he'll never fit in. So it is his story and self-discovery, and I've heard it's really good in an audiobook format. And finally is Coronation, the prompt you must complete last, and that is to read either Crown of Feathers or Heart of Flames. And this may change on the Readathon round 2, but for round 1, if you happen to make it all the way to Coronation, it is read one of these. Crown of Feathers is the first book, Heart of Flames is the sequel if you've already read this and need an opportunity to pick up this, or just reread them for fun because they're incredible. And that is all for part 2 of my Phoenix Writers Readathon recommendations. Let me know what path you're choosing and what you're going to read, and I'll check you in my next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, friends!